Welcome to Lesson 11 of Module 1 and 2 for Investigating Science. Our do now for today. So read the statement in the graphic, and the graphic says, in the absence of information, we jump to the worst conclusions. Do you agree or disagree? What makes you say that? Pause the video now. So our video for today focuses on drawing conclusions. And our inquiry question is, how do conclusions drawn from the interpretation of primary data promote further scientific investigation? So we're going to be focusing on actually writing a conclusion. We're going to be looking at another scientific report conclusion, and then you're going to be able to write your own based on the information we've discussed and the marking criteria, which I'll present to you. So when we talk about discussions and conclusions, so it says here 2 or more sentences that sums up the finding of the investigation. That's what we talk about when we're writing a conclusion. For us, the discussion section is analyzing the information. So our conclusion looks at whether the data will disprove or support a hypothesis. And then in our discussion, we're not simply summarizing the points already made. Instead, we're interpreting our findings, and we have to look at it from an analysis point of view. It's not a description, okay? It's an analysis, and it shows whether you have exceeded in addressing the needs stated in the introduction. So here is an example of one here, and we're looking at, on the left-hand side, we're looking at all the different parts of the conclusion is composed of. So we're looking at restating the aim in our first sentence, summarizing our main findings. In italics and bold here, we can suggest some implications for the field of knowledge. So what we're looking at, the just bold looks at the significance or contribution of the study. And the underlined bold is acknowledging our limitations. And we can see here that there is much more that we could include here in our discussion section, but each of these, looking at these points and making sure they're included in your analysis section. So without looking at the part on the right and just using the left as a guide, making sure that your discussion follows that process, and that you're explaining and relating all of that information based on your experiment that you've undertaken. And here we've got some sentence starters for each of the different, I guess, paragraphs that we could include, okay, all the different ideas that we're going to include in our discussion. So the sample language here is really important. So you can pause this video here and use these sentence started to help you expand on your information and make sure that you're writing in a formal academic language. So remembering that even though your group faced some difficulties here, looking at how you could write that in a formal way is really important. And for our assessment task, we're looking at our marking criteria here and making sure that each of these sections in the left, okay, so even though the marking criteria is provided here for this section, we want to make sure that we're working in this excellent range. So looking at reliability and validity, looking at the qualitative and the quantitative data, and whether they were useful in our investigation. Looking at the relationship between primary and secondary data, is it the same, or do we need a report back to the council? Looking at some complications or issues,